Perfect, thank you.
All right, welcome everyone. We just had the turnout I hoped we would, because I know this is of interest to the community and the Bennett family on so many levels. So I'm Linda Smith. I am associated with the museum, and today I'm wearing the hat of the Madison County Historic Preservation Commission as well. After I do the introduction, I'm going to bring up Deb Taylor, who is a Bennett descendant. So she's going to talk about the early Bennett cabin before it got here. I'm going to talk a little bit again about its life in the park, and then I'm going to give it to Sky Smothers, who is the director of the Winterset Parks and Rec. He's going to pass it on to Alex Barassi, who is from Shive Hattery Engineering Architecture, and then it's going to go to Philip. What's your last name? Grossman, sorry, didn't get that one. And his wife Tracy are here, and he is the artisan who made it what it is today. So, Deb, I'm going to start off with you. Do we use it? Yes, the clicker. Is it this one? Right there. Okay. Yep.
And
right. Okay.
We're ready.
Yep.
Okay.
And I will be timekeeper if I need to.
Oh, okay. Well, I talk a lot, so watch out. This is a constructed picture of the Bennett family. It was professionally done where it combined all of the kids with mom and dad. Obviously, back then, they didn't always have the photographer handy for that type of thing. To the far left hand, or yeah, to your right-hand side.
That's a better one.
Okay, there you go. Is Andrew Bennett, his wife Mary standing behind him, Mary and Gideon Bennett, and then all of their children. So first I'll tell you a little bit about Andrew Bennett. He was born in October of 1835 in this little town in Marion County, Indiana. I think it's called Indianapolis now. But at that time, it was smaller than like Erla. I mean, it was really a tiny town. So anyway, that's where he was born. A lot of his younger siblings were born there too. Originally, his dad was from Pennsylvania. So anyway, he was the son of Jacob and Suzanne Schaefer Bennett, who also moved to Madison County and are buried in the Bennett Cemetery. Anyway, they had 17 kids. 14 of them survived and actually came to Iowa. And the interesting thing about Andrew is, I assume I didn't know him personally, but he was an animal lover. And he captured elk back in Indiana, broke them to drive, and helped with the move to Iowa. His dad drove the ox team, he drove his elk team when they moved. And I thought that was kind of interesting. Not only did he drive them, but he kept them here, used them, came to Winterset, whatever errands they had to do, until finally he traded them down in Missouri for a mule team. So anyway, kind of interesting. If you want to go out and break some elk, they can do that job. The neat thing about the family is the old Andrew's siblings is they all remain very close. Very close. In fact, if you start going through the old Madison newspapers, you'll find that there are mentioned Bennett brothers. And they did a lot of farming, they did a lot of hay mowing, they raised horses, and they stayed together. They did a lot of logging, I think you call it, logging and that type of thing, providing supplies for bridges and stuff like that. So it was a very, very tight-knit family. Well, he married Marion Gideon, and she was the daughter of Henry Gideon. They lived nearby as neighbors, and then they later moved to Winterset and that type of thing. But anyway, got married in 1860, and her family was very close too. And anyway, so a lot of family there. One story that the family has is, like I said, Andrew Bennett really enjoyed horses. In fact, he raised horses and sold them. And what they would do is they purchased their stallions overseas, stallions, had them shipped to the United States, put on a railroad and shipped them down to, or trained ride them over to Osceola, and they'd go pick them up and bring them back up here. And then on weekends, they'd bring them into Winterset and use them for stud purposes. And so that's kind of what the horse business was. Now, his home place was, I said 2-story, it might have been a 3-story barn. All I know is the ground level of it was set up. And they had used those great big thick bridge planks to make stalls to hold those stallions because, you know, they obviously were worth a lot of money and they were keeping them safe. So anyway, let me see here. Tell you the last thing I can tell you about, oh, they also raised trotters, if that made any difference. And Andrew was breaking a horse one time. And the horse actually came, it was in a saddle, you know. And the horse came up and went over backward on him and put the saddle horn through his stomach. Yeah. So anyway, he suffered a lot with that. A couple years later, went to the doctor. They said it was cancer, and he passed. That's what killed him, is, you know, breaking those horses. So that's a little bit about Andrew. Now I got to figure this out.
And Deb, you can see it on the screen up there.
Right there. Okay. All right, we're going to talk a little bit about where the cabin was located. And as you can see, it was in Douglas Township, section 23. This is Madison County. You can kind of see where Douglas Township is. And this is a closer locale of it, section 23. Now, the interesting thing about that is it's the north part of North River is where we're at. Okay, you can see this is a newer map, 1896, which is pretty close to what it was like when that cabin was built. But you'll notice to the your right-hand side is the Klingensmith property. Well, what they decided in 1890, according to Walt Libby's research, was to build a covered bridge there, right about at that location. And it was sometimes called actually it was the last bridge built in Madison County, but it was sometimes called the Klingensmith Bridge, sometimes the Bennett Bridge, because they were right there neighbors, close to each other. And there was also a ford on that river, right close to the bridge. Okay, that plays something important here in a little bit. When I go to talk about the timeline of the bridge. But if it's okay with you, I want to read a story. This story was written by my grandmother, and what she did is she had her dad, Walter Vernon Bennett, which was the youngest of the kids, and his older brother, George Nelson Bennett, he lived to be 101. So those two lived close, and she got him and sat him down and said, "Tell me about that log cabin." So this is what they have said. Now, I want you to know that they didn't have the convenience of internet or anything to double check their facts. These were two guys just sitting there trying to remember off the top of their head. So if there's any discrepancies, it's because of that, okay? Necessity, according to Webster's dictionary, defines the word as a need for something. And it was because of that the cabin was built. So what happened? Okay. Word was received by Andrew Bennett that one of his sons and his family was returning to Madison County. Time period, remember, back in those days, people didn't stick around in a house for 20 years. They were moving almost every year, depending on the farm they were going to farm. You know, they would move to that farm. Next year, they got a different farm. They moved to that farm. So moving was a very common thing, okay? But they didn't have any house for this son. And here he was moving back to Madison County. So what are they going to do? Okay, there wasn't a vacant house on the land owned by the Bennetts, but there was acres and acres of timber. It was then decided that the cabin would be built, and the most suitable place for it was there at the North Branch, North River. Now, to the north and west of where that circle is was all timber. So it was a perfect place. Not only that, but they had a sawmill located there too. So anyway, that was the purpose. It was a quaint setting for the log cabin. And like I said, the covered bridge was just right there that spanned North Branch. Into the north and the west, like I said, was timber ground. And up in that area was known as the Buffalo Walla. I think that's how they pronounced it. So anyway, it was a depression in the ground and everybody knew about it. And so it was kind of a neat scenic thing to remember. The location, okay, Andrew Bennett and 3 of his sons, Lee, George, and Gerald, built the cabin. Walter Vernon, his youngest, was only 12, and he had to go to school because school was important. The logs were cut and brought across the river at the ford. Horses were used to haul the logs to the location of the cabin. The logs were of elm. I couldn't make out the rest, but it was ash, walnut, anything that was growing naturally at that time. And to smooth them, a tool known as a foot adze, okay, and a broadaxe were used. Each log had to be notched to fit in its proper place. After the logs had been all placed in the building, clay, rock, and water were mixed together and used to patch the holes between the logs and to keep out the cold. Okay, remember these are 2 old men just talking. They, at that time, said the cabin was approximately 14 foot by 14 foot. Not so, we know that. But anyway, it was close. It was consisted of only the one room. It had 3 windows and 2 doors. So the cabin that we see in the park is very representative. I mean, it's right on as to what they said. In its original location, the cabin faced the south. That is, the front side with the 1 door and the 1 window faced the south. There was no fireplace in the original cabin. It did not have a foundation, as buildings today would have. It did have a board floor. This was made of 10-inch boards. The 10-inch boards were also used in the loft and the roof. Wooden shingles were put on the roof. The shingles and the 10-inch boards were purchased. The rafters were made of small logs. In the cabin building, the only nails that were used were around the windows and putting on the roof and the shingles. The windows were 2 sash windows consisting of 12 panes to each sash. They were open and propped up with a stick. Any of you remember propping up your windows with a stick? Okay. The loft of the cabin was a great convenience to the family. It was a place where the homemade comforts could be placed for extra beds. It was also used for the children or when company came. Usually the children were the ones in the loft. To get to the loft, which was almost the full length of the cabin, there was a ladder made. It was put on the right-hand side of the front entrance or to the side without the window. The ladder would then when not in use, was just laid down along the wall. So that's kind of what they did. Okay, contrary to any stories, Andrew himself never lived in the cabin. I'll just clarify that. It was all his kids. Okay, although only the necessities of living were able to be in that small cabin, anyone living there thought it was a very homey place. The floorboards, like I said, it had a wood floor, had been scrubbed white with that lye soap that they had made. And so they just scrubbed and scrubbed to do that. Yes, exactly. They did have homemade rag rugs, and the cook stove was in there as well as a wood box, bed, table, chairs, a cupboard for pottery type dishes. And they actually had purchased that furniture. They hadn't made the furniture homemade, so just as a note. Lighting was by a kerosene lamp. Much of the food was home prepared, so they dried the apples. Outside of the cabin, they had 2 big barrels, and that's where they kept salted meat. That's how they stored the meat. Let's see, I'm going to go through a timeline in a little bit, but it continues on. After the Stearns family moved, Andrew Bennett's daughter Arzella Allen and her husband Andrew Allen and family moved into the cabin. Their daughter Pearl was born there in 1900. Pearl actually was a little older than that, but anyway, again, no internet for him.
Deb, you've got about 3 to 5 minutes left.
Oh,
Yeah, I know, it's a great
she's going to
story.
cut me off. I see how that is. Okay. So anyway, I'm going to flip on then, and we'll just get to the timeline. Oh, there's in the newspaper, Linda's went to the effort of saying what they thought about that cabin when they first noticed it being built. It was in 1895 that the cabin was built. Like I said, that bridge was put in about 1890. The cabin was there in 1895. So it was very convenient for everybody. And there's some more pictures of the family. Okay, now we're at the timeline. So the first person to live in the cabin was the son, friend A.I. They called him Dick, and his family. And they had moved, okay, yeah, it's quite a name, isn't it? Okay, and then after friend A.I. was this Jake Stearns that I was talking about. And what he did is he finished clearing the ground, and he added a lean-to to the log cabin. And that was for the kitchen area. In 1898 to 1900, the son, George Nelson Bennett, who helped build the cabin, and his family moved there. And then in late 1900, Dick moved back again. Okay, in 1901, Andrew Bennett's daughter, Arzella, and her husband, which I mentioned earlier, moved into the cabin. And then in December 1905, Andrew Bennett dies. Like I said, he had that horse accident, caused cancer. The man dies in 1905. Well, his son, Marquis Alvin, came to live there with Mom because Mom didn't want to stay in the house by herself, I guess. And then Marquis Alvin moved on to Homestead in Montana and Wyoming, out in that area. So Mom moved back to the house, and the cabin was rented to Bill Bailey and his men because they were building a house across the road. And it was convenient to use that and close to the sawmill and all that type of thing. In 1916, yep, I'm still there. Okay, in 1916, Judge William Cooper, who was part of the park board, was driving around, noticed that cabin. It was vacant at that time, right? After Bill Bailey, it was vacant. And he asked permission to move it to the city park. And the family was in agreement with that. They thought that was a wonderful thing. So they moved it there. And I've got, let's see, pictures right here of the city park. I'm going to let Linda take over. And like I said, I could talk forever. So if you have questions, please let me know.
Yeah, Deb will be around afterwards, so. Okay, before we got to all the work that's been done recently, I thought the years in between 1917 when it was moved and these current years when it's been refurbished deserved a little time because that's when we spent time there. So I just want to go through a few photos. I do want to give props to the drone guy who's very faithful to historic preservation and goes out and takes photos for us from that gorgeous angle. So that's a before photo as it looked. And in 1917, when it was moved, there were a couple things that the newspapers said about it. They were pretty excited about the log cabin being moved there. They thought it would help with a shelter problem. Now, the only shelter there in 1917, there was no shelter there in 1917. Come to think of it, I was going to say that there was a stone shelter, but it wasn't until 1920 that the open air stone shelter was there. So they wanted something they were just starting to enjoy the park because of automobiles, and they cleaned out the cows, and so they needed a shelter there. So they were interested in preserving the cabins that were vanishing and also having a shelter. And then they planned to leave it open. The one to the right says that they put a fireplace in it with a block chimney, with a crane and an old tea kettle, like you were going to go there and do your tea, I guess. The doors were hung with an old-fashioned wooden hinges and latch and string for fastening, and the string has been fixed so that it will always be out for all residents of the community. I bet that caused trouble. It just always does. This picture was a postcard, and they used it to serve coffee at the Old Settlers reunion. We're used to thinking of the St. Charles Old Settlers reunion, which still goes on, but Winterset had one for a number of years. I'm not sure the number yet. And they would open it up. See, they must have locked it because they had to open it, so there was trouble. And they would serve coffee from there. So you see the benches around there, so that may have been at a time when they had one of those celebrations. This is a fun picture. It looks like the late teens to 20s based on the hats and coats. At the far right, you can still see one of those benches there. Not much vegetation around it except the tree in the back. And this photo, Marty Knapp brought. This is from one of her Gordon cousins, and we believe it's from the late 1930s. And you can see the logs so well on there that if you count the number of logs up, there's 8 to the top of the door. Here's one from the mid-1950s, or the 1950s, mid-1900s. There's 8 logs to the door there. That was an easy one to count as well. But we liked it. We took postcards of it. We took pictures of family in front of it. And it was part of Scooping the Loop. If you grew up here, there was the Gold Room, and there were the fairgrounds, and there was the park, and you just kind of scooped around through those. And in 1962, Officer Kenny took up a patrol there. Gary Allen had this photo of it. There weren't speed bumps, so on that back straightaway, you could get it going. And he was there to stop that.
But the earlier pictures had hitching posts.
Did they? Mm-hmm. Yes, there's some posts there. Yep. Though there would have been plenty of cars by that time. And then wanted to give a shout out to the times that it was redone. Police Chief Lehman and Dick Mapes, who was park custodian and had been a police officer earlier, did some restoration on it. I didn't really find anything about that in the paper. They did that quietly. And then in 1986, it was an Eagle Scout project, and the sign got changed both those times, led by Joe Roach and his fellow Boy Scouts. They took care of that. And there was an article there that said they replaced the chinking, sprayed the walls, and it was a community process. They had community contributions. So the community has always been part of Bennett Cabin. So my last picture is this one. I thought it was stark in the winter, but it was easy to count that there are now 7 logs to the top of the doorway. So like all old things, we tend to change a little over time. So there's one other part I want to talk about. The Historic Preservation Commission and the Parks and Rec, when John Pletchett was the head of that, and Jared and I were talking in this room one day. John wanted to give the cabin back to us, and we already have 2. We don't need another old cabin to take care of. Didn't want that, and Jared said, well, why don't you make it a National Historic District, and then there might be funds and, get started down that road. I was chair of the Historic Preservation Commission at that point and said, no, I should have had that idea. But we did go ahead and do that starting in 2018, and that was sort of the start of looking at the park as a whole entity and valuing each piece in there. So I am going to turn it over to Sky. He's going to take the next part. And you got the mic?
We'll just leave it here. So yeah, my name's Sky Smothers, Winterset Parks and Recreation Director, and really I just want to talk about one thing, and that's why did we actually decide to start to restore the Bennett Cabin? This question is not simple to answer. It did take several years. So with segueing from what Linda talked about, so Linda had mentioned about the process that they started back in 2017, 2018 to get City Park on the list of National Historic Landmarks. So I was hired in 2020, so that process already been taking place for a couple years. And so when they officially were listed on the National Register of Historic Places, along with 17 other contributing structures, you got Clark Tower, you got the bridges, the vehicular, the pedestrian, the landscape, there's a whole host of them. It was at that time that I started working with Alex and his team to assess the entirety of the park. Looking at all those structures, going through that process with him and his team probably took about a year or so to go through and look at the cabin, look at the north shelter, look at the south shelter, what was wrong with them, what needed to be done. I could tell very quickly in my short time here in 2020 that there was a huge need of maintaining those structures for their historic preservation. At the time, north shelter had a hole in the west side of the roof that constantly leaked. So we had to go through that. We got those cost estimates, and then it really was, it's a tough decision because everything's priority one, right? But we only got funds for one project at a time. So we had to start, and we started with the north shelter, and that's what we did because it had a hole, it's used, it's rented, it's reservable space, so that's why we chose to go with the north shelter. And then we went to the south shelter, and then we had some partnerships to replace some outdated and some playgrounds. And during those times, I had folks from the Bennett family, Linda, late Jim Nelson, they would be calling and saying, hey, what's going on at the cabin? We got to get that cabin. Linda mentions it goes from 8 to 7. So I heard it from, first time I got here is we got to get this cabin restored. And I agreed with them. And I kept telling them it's on the list. It's not quite time yet because we had to get through some of these other renovation projects. Around that same time, 2021, we did a needs assessment. Those of you that live in Winterset proper, if you live here in city limits, you probably received that informational, that letter to try to get some feedback of what individuals here, the residents, wanted us to do as a department. Where do you want us to put our resources? That was when 94% of the households that indicated that they visited City Park. That's a lot of people that go to the park. We've partnered with the DOT. We get over about 120,000 estimated visitors to that park between about May and October, which is also fantastic. Within that same survey, 64% of you indicated that, which is the most, wanted us, the Parks and Rec Department, to put our resources into City Park. So fix what we've got there, maintain what we have, invest into City Park. So that's what we did from 21 to 24. Again, we renovated the north, the south, and the two playgrounds were replaced and updated. So I remember sitting there with Jim. Linda and I debated if she was there or not, but Jim came up and a couple years ago, and Jim Nelson, and we're sitting there and we're talking about it, and I just looked at Jim and I said, it's time. We're gonna do the Bennett cabin. Sorry, didn't expect to get like this. Jim's a great guy, and so we're able to do that. He was extremely happy to be able to do that, and with that, we started down the process with Alex and his team, looked at some grants, and were able to get that done. We were scared that building was going to fall down, that cabin was going to fall. Luckily, it didn't, and we started getting the construction documents ready to go, worked with Shive, got the bids out, and that's kind of where we're at today. So at that point, or time, I'd like to turn over to Alex and let him talk about the process of going through this.
He's got one.
Thanks, Sky. As Sky mentioned, his main role was the why. I stepped in with Shive Hattery, and we had a team that was trying to figure out the how to make this a reality. Our biggest goal in this project was maintaining the historical integrity of the cabin while also essentially providing the longevity to the cabin too. Through the photos you've seen through the years, there's some issues that happened, and we're coming in here and saying, okay, what can we do to maintain that historical integrity, keep the parts that make it the cabin that it is, but also make sure that this can last for another 50 plus years for generations to come. So one of the things we noticed, we came in and did this assessment. We came in and saw that the roof had been replaced at one time through the process. So actually through that design process and working with Heritage, we actually came back with an idea of how to bring back more historical accuracy to that roof, but also replacing that roof in a way that made sense and still made it so it was going to be safe, because this roof had years and years of some water damage that we needed to make sure that we took it off and fully replaced it. And we ended up coming to a solution that was more historically accurate, and I'll let Phil and Tracy get into that a little bit more with some of their photos. Some of the other items that we noticed, and we kind of talked about this with the 8 logs to the 7 logs, you can kind of see here that the chimney and the cabin were starting to fall away from each other. A lot of that is due to the foundation underneath the cabin. It was just sitting on a soil foundation, and over years the logs can rot, and you can start to get some sinking. So one of our goals here was to come back and make sure that that wouldn't occur again. So when we did the deconstruction process, we made sure that we had some temporary shoring up to maintain the structural integrity of the chimney. But then when we also did the reconstruction, we put a concrete foundation into the ground in order to make sure that this cabin wouldn't have some foundation issues in the future. So we tried to implement that, and that gets hidden away so it doesn't really impact the historical accuracy of the cabin, and allows us to enjoy the rest of the historical parts. And then the other item we're doing here is just making sure we're going back and maintaining the access, the doors, the windows. A lot of them were really difficult, so we put together specifications and working with Sky and the construction team, coming up with solutions where we could actually make it so that these doors would still work and there'd still be access back into the cabin. So we can kind of bring that back. When we were going through this process, we tried to open up these doors, and we were maybe able to get about 2 or 3 feet, just enough for somebody to slip in and be able to do some research. But a lot of that was because of the settling of the cabin. So hopefully now, with a lot of these new specifications and how to restore it, we should be able to take advantage of the fact that now it will have a working door. And the rest of the process really was us putting all that together into construction documents, getting the specifications, working with schedules, and then working with the City of Winterset and then Heritage Woodworks, Phil and Tracy, in order to come up with a solution of how to take those specifications and turn it into reality. And that's really where Phil and Tracy take over. So I'll get to the good part here where they have the interesting photos. Yep.
Okay. Well, good morning. My name is Phil Grossman and my wife Tracy. Heritage Woodworks. We do preservation restoration that's one of our main focuses. So it's been it's a family business, and I've been doing it for quite a few years now, but it's always exciting. You don't know what you're going to get into, and we really enjoy history. And so some of the aspects of the communities that we get to be involved with, we just appreciate the opportunity and the experience with it. So yeah, special thanks to everybody that's been a part of this. Sky is wonderful. He brought donuts to the team, which means that's my boys, right? So if you wonder how it went up so quick, it's probably... Oh, sure. Yes, I'll try to speak up. Yeah, so we kind of get into this. Yeah, I like this cabin. It's very neat. Let's see.
And you can see it up there.
Oh,
I know
there.
that's.
Yeah. We'll go with this. All right, so we kind of do an evaluation too, like we work together with everybody and just start looking for details, and that's just part of the preservation. What are we going to keep and what are we going to restore? And so there's some interesting notes you can see up here. That's like a catted chimney. So back in the day, it would have had a stone fireplace down below, and then it's like stacked small diameter logs, and stiles have been cut, mixed with we call it like daubing, which would be sand and clay. But it's literally a wood chimney that it had when they first put it up, which was kind of fun. Other notes, as you see exposed log ends, which it was never sided. So there's something to note that a lot of cabins in Iowa were put up to be sided within the first few years. And so all your corners would be really kind of square and ready to fur out and put siding. But this one was always meant to just be an exposed log cabin. The joinery showed that it was done with some utility. Like, they were definitely motivated to get this up. They were going fast. Another note, we were talking about the roof structure. You can kind of see something sticking out on the ends of the roof. And I think we have another one with, yeah, there we go. Okay, so what you're looking at, the shape of these ends are actually felling from cutting the trees with axes. And they're left. They're not even, there's a difference between felling and skidding. So these, a little higher. Okay, a little louder. Oh, I feel like I'm yelling at everybody. I like being on the job site. That's my home. Okay, so if you look here, there's just some fun details. These logs, these are what we'd say are felling wedges. It's like how you cut the tree down, only when you cut it down. And skidding is when you're dragging a log. And so there's actually different shapes that you cut. Like when you're skidding, you're just rounding the edges evenly. And felling, it comes out looking sharp almost. And so all of these are actually, it just means that these were cut really close to the cabin and just pulled over, whether with mules or something like that, and quickly. They never cut them off with a saw. So we actually tried to preserve that. We replaced a few logs, and we try to get those details right, down to that kind of detail. But you can see also in this one already, they're having some, the shingles are going bad a little bit, and this is really early on. But you also notice something about the roof structure itself. This is not flat. It has some motion of the ocean in it, And that's important. It's because the framing is not done with sawn lumber. There's logs under all that. Originally, the whole roof structure, except for the sheathing, would have been all logs. So that all goes into the design and the restoration of how do we preserve that or reproduce it. Yeah, so then it comes the simple work. You can see just for these are actually the rafters of the new roof system out there. So we went out and cut probably, 40 logs, something like that, just for the roof alone. And it's kind of funny. When you're skidding out from the timber, it's nice. We don't have horses. Actually, we were working on that, but just a little tractor to be able to go back in the timber and skid those logs out. What we're looking for, this is like a 26-foot straight pole of native hardwood. So that one's hackberry. But they're pretty uncommon. You're talking about maybe 2 per acre in a healthy stand of timber. And so it takes a lot of walking the timber to find where you're going to pull materials from. And we have lots of friends that let us go and cut out their timber, and that's enjoyable. Oh, yes. Normally we don't show this side of it.
I stuck these in.
This is good.
We all saw.
Oh, yes. We call it's like open heart surgery. It's not a pretty sight, and it's not for the faint of heart. Especially when I looked up and there's a tour bus stopped right in front of the job site. So what you can see, we're disassembling here. And we've already tagged, you can see the tags. We've marked what we're going to keep. And then we have to get rid of what we're not. And so the roof structure had gone bad. It's not original. You can actually see the windows are not original. And so everything we're trying to take down without hurting anything, but to do it as efficiently as possible. And so lifting off the roof in chunks, that's a good way to keep from pushing your walls out, things like that. But it gets scary really quick. Oh yeah. Now this you can see. So somewhere along the line, that catted chimney, that wood chimney, was replaced. And here you can see there's actually 3 stages here that they added on. And so there's your original firebox, a little addition, and then somewhere they replaced that catted chimney with a stone chimney, but it actually wasn't a functional chimney. And I don't know when that happened, but so we braced it to make sure when we deconstructed the cabin, it wasn't going to get toppled over. Oh yeah. And there you go. We got the boys. Everything's cataloged and tagged, but we haven't cleaned anything. We haven't worked on it yet. And this is kind of in the process. We're in the shop. We're cutting replacements, and we're matching. We're matching the size, the species, the tool marks, as well as, so you think about the replacement is kind of like the restoration. And when we treat the logs, like we've cleaned these logs, that's more like the preservation, keeping them good for the next. Like we've gone through gallons of epoxy, but you can't see it. It's in the decayed areas and things like that. Yeah, there's a significant amount of work that goes into just cleaning up a log and getting it ready for the next 40 years or longer. Replacement, there's a couple replacements on the bottom. Those are white oak. It holds up a lot better to time, and it's an original species. So this is one of the surprises. So it was a three-sided. When they put back that stone chimney, there was not a fourth side. And so up against the cabin, there was nothing. So I'm glad no one started a fire. But knowing the original use of the cabin, we wanted to get it to where you can have a fire in the fireplace and make some tea. So we actually put a liner in, so there's a full liner in it, and repaired, fixed, reinforced. You can actually see the flue sticking out the top. So now it's a fully functional fireplace. And so just another picture of reconstruction. You can see like we're matching the original details. We have new window bucks and things like that, all done with original nails, basically. We find we've sourced all this hardware. There's actually a place up in the Northeast that still makes square nails. So we'll order in pounds and pounds of square spikes and everything to match. And further on, so there's other details here. Yeah, there's lots of details. They were putting this up very fast. That you can see the size difference. You can also see that the hewing is minimal on many of them. There was a lot of small diameter poles in it, and so they were using what they had. And also, it was whitewashed several times. Now this is interesting. So this is more of an original style roof. And you might notice the logs start stepping in to actually make the roof structure. And that's different than, it's kind of like a purlin with rafters on top. And there's actually several ways of doing that. Originally, the way they would have done that with mules and ropes to pull those poles, basically they'd roll them up. You can wrap ropes down underneath and roll these up, and you keep stacking your logs. If you look very close, you'll see a notch here. There's a few notches cut between the logs, and that's where they would have climbed the cabin as they're building it without ladders. So, and this is an example of, oh yeah, the axe stuck right in there. There's your purlins basically, and then your rafters go on top of that, and those all get just notched in. So, yeah, so now we're to that point. And you can see we still got these nice waves in the roof. And, you know, we got the purlins, just like those details. They're still sticking out. There's a lot of details in here to make it last longer and to be lower maintenance. But the idea is that you can't actually see them. So there's some modern techniques in the roofing, things like that. But the copper flashing, it's just a really good option for long-term and it's a relatively historic material to be using as well. So, let's see. Now I have to check my notes. Oh, yeah, I guess this will be oh, that's just fun. Does anyone should we do some questions later? Is that
will. And you want to talk about your tools?
Oh, yes, the tools.
And then that's the last slide, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Okay, that's good. Yeah. Yep, so, and just as a last note there, you can see the difference of a historic roof and how they looked. And it had a lot more organic feel. And originally, so we did gain some height on that chimney because over the years, everything had decreased in height. By adding the logs back, like on the other side, we gained 2 logs basically on the front of the cabin. And that's about 18 inches of elevation change. So, but still we're within about 4 inches of the ridge, but the original chimney had a little bit more height, and that means better draft. So the other thing is, I wanted to note there's 2 doors. This is really super common with frontier cabins, a front door, back door. And multiple diaries have said that they would run an ox through the house. So if you wanted to bring...
Say the bottom is it rotted away, what percent of the logs were you able to keep?
A good number. Like we got, if you look, at the bottom 2 front and back have been replaced, this side. These are all originals. I would say we're probably kept 85% of the logs. These are all originals up here on the gable ends. So really, we replaced what had already been taken out, like the whole roof structure, but that was not original. And the sill logs are what had really gone bad. That's very typical. A lot of that is actually what we call splashback. You got water coming off the roof, it splashes the ground, it brings up fungus and constant moisture to your bottom logs. So that's why we went white oak. And there's some chemical treatments in there as well to help with longevity. This should be good for a good long time. So, yeah. Yeah, so then there's that. I don't know if you guys, when they were talking, and they said a foot adze and a broad axe. So we use these tools. This would be like a foot adze, also called like a tie adze. And so it's not for the faint of heart, right? You actually use it like so, walking on top, but you can also use it from the side. It's heavier than a carpenter adze, but they said there used to be a test. If you were good with the adze, guys would have a competition and you could split the sole of your boots and stop it without, no blood, right? I don't know what kind of game that is to play. So that's about a 7-pound head. A broad axe. This is like an original broad axe, Pioneer one. You'll see there's high carbon steel just on this part. It's forge welded into a mild steel, not quite wrought iron, but you can see the offset handle, and the grind, it's flat grind on one side, bevel on the other. And so you can actually smooth, but it's a 12-pound head. Now I don't understand, because all the men were shorter back then, lighter frames, but they must have just been built with cable. This one's actually from Austria that showed up in Iowa, and it's a smaller, it'd be like it's an adze, or it's a hewing axe basically. But you can see it still has forge marks, and that puts it around somewhere probably in the late 1700s, somewhere in there. And a lot of tools were just brought and passed family member to family member. And we were working on a job and somebody stopped and just dropped one of these off. Like, you'd probably like this. This would be really typical. It's a crosscut saw. And if you look at the tooth pattern, it's a turtle tooth, which for the Midwest, we mostly entirely native would be hardwoods. And so a lancer tooth or these other teeth patterns wouldn't really cut that. And a turtle tooth is meant for the really hard woods. And so something short like this, the handle's removable, so you could cut a few holes in the log wall, stick your blade through, put the handle back on, and pull it back and forth. So, but the tool that was used the most on this cabin by far would have been just a felling axe. And a felling axe, you can see, it leaves a very distinctive pattern. It's going to have a very round, especially the earlier ones, had a very round blade. And we found not only, so felling axe was used to chop the trees down, but all the joinery, and almost all the joinery was cut with a felling axe. The gable ends, those tapers on the logs, all with a felling axe. So there was some smoothing that they did, but primarily this was a bunch of guys with axes. So, but yeah.
I'm going to just go to the last slide that gives us all a chance to show all of these guys our appreciation for them. You can see it took a lot of teamwork. So let's just open it up for any questions you have for anyone, and Carlos will start off.
I wanted to hear about what you put between the logs.
Okay, so
They're probably mostly going to have questions for you. I don't think anybody's going to ask for the architectural drawings from them.
oh, now those are fun though. Okay, yeah. So this is where we kind of blend a little bit. What we actually put back, there's a closed cell foam on both sides. There's a metal lath in there that reinforces the masonry, and then it's like a Type O style mortar, which has a lot of lime. It's somewhat flexible, and it's a lot more historic. There's a little bit of Portland just to get it to stiffen up. There's sawdust in it, there is straw in it, and some mineral colorants to get it a little bit closer to the original. A lot of river sand was used originally in the mortar mixes and masonry, and that had a lot more of a warm tone to it. So that's why the cabin has not such a stark white chinking. Now that's pretty close when you're looking at it to what it would have looked like originally. But originally, they were rechinked every year. They'd cram anything and everything into the joints. I mean, we've found boots, we've found corn cobs and shingles, and I mean, it was, and lots of like flour sacks, gingham, I mean, you name it. I think every housewife must have been just cramming anything in every crack. So basically we had to pull all that out because over a longevity-wise, that starts to make things move and it's not good. So, but yeah, does that answer?
Yeah, how did you keep it from not sloughing all over the logs?
Yes. Well, that takes practice. Yes, it is probably a little tidier even than it would have been originally.
Thank you.
A lot of trowels help a lot. And originally they would have used like wood trowels, which can be as simple as a couple boards nailed together. Yes?
This might be for Sky. Sky, what was the funding for this project? Was it city funding, grant money, combination of that?
Yeah, good question. So we initially were going to look at some grant funding, but a couple years back that grant wasn't available. So we used 100% local option sales tax for this project. So that obviously comes back from folks staying here locally and spending the money, and we 100% put that back into the park.
And second question, what's the signage going to be now in terms of recognition for this project? Are you going to retain any of the previous restoration verbiage, or is it going to be just the current restoration project? Have you thought about that?
I mean, there's going to be a little bit combination of everything. You guys have seen some of the old signage. They still have it.
Mm-hmm.
We're not getting rid of it. So they may or may not add some of their own little stuff to the sign. Also had conversations for the future to look at some interpretives on the outside. The Bennetts are working on a very, very nice family portrait to put on the inside. So we're still working out kind of what that looks like, but our hope is to have a little bit of the past, some of the present, and then maybe some interpretives and some other stuff inside and out. Not definitive at this point, but in the works. No, nothing from the past is going to go away. So.
And what will be the exposure? You talked about inside. How many times would it be open and in what situations?
Sure. So, right now we think obviously when it's done, we're going to have an uptick of folks wanting to have us open that, which we will. Is it going to be opened every day? More than likely not. But we'll kind of just see what that demand is. We know there's going to be folks wanting to come in and see it. They've whitewashed inside to get back to the original state of it. Like I said, we're going to work on getting some signage in there. Hopefully we can have an opening of sort in the near future this year, but we're still kind of work out those details.
And you would have it open for this year's Bennett family reunion?
That's our hope. Yep.
To drive an oxen from through.
Now they bring out their elk.
So is the lofts back in it?
So the structural members are there, but there's no boards.
There's no boards.
But oftentimes it was just loose boards up there. So
And then you said originally there was no chimney, but the chimney was added later. How much later?
well, so it's. I think when they moved it, this is.
They added the chimney at that time.
Yep, and then as it degraded, they kind of remodeled it several times. So.
You know roughly how many hours went into it?
Whew.
It's like a lot.
A lot. Yeah. We try not to keep track. Yeah. It'd be a lot, I suppose.
So what type of doors and windows are going back into it that
Ah.
would be more to original?
Yes. So wood latch, wood hinge, and then the windows are still on their way, but it'll be back to the divided light windows. So much more, accurate to the historic. So, yes.
How did you attain your expertise on how to redo things like this? What is your background to get you to where you are and doing what you do?
Well, my dad was he liked history a lot, so it started that early. I think I was 12 when my dad put a spoke shave in my hands, and might have been earlier than that. So making wheelbarrow handles for a neighbor, and so lots of hand tools early on. Did reproduction furniture and a lot of carpentry construction, a lot of custom, but then always kind of holding on to traditional building methods and skills. So hand planes and axes and all of that. And then it was just kind of a necessity, being asked to get involved in some of it. And like, well, we could get that done. And then there's more and more of a demand. Like there's some history to it. It was kind of like these worlds coming together. A lot of the cabins were restored in the 70s, and they're all coming due. So, and I wish there was a lot more people working on them.
Your sons work with you?
Yes, my sons.
Your son's out there?
And that's what Adam, we start really early with our kids on, to get the comfortable, you don't just pick up an axe, and I've tried to hire some older guys with axes, and so I think we've recognized that it has to start early, and so passing those skills on, so hopefully they can continue some of this maintenance and preserving. It is kind of like, yeah, I suppose I think we do what's asked of us, and or try to do our best. So
Learned a lot along the way.
absolutely,
You would pick things up.
yeah. We paying close attention and listening seems to help a lot. So we try to do that.
We're at our hour, and if anybody needs to get up and go, please do. And those of you who would like to stay and have more questions, do that as well.
And I'm going to do one more plug for next month, July 8th. We have Carla Rocker, and she's going to be discussing the Dabney family and the Dabney house located at 4th Avenue and West Jefferson. So that'll be July 8th at 9 o'clock. And again, if you want to stick around and ask more questions, please do. If you need to leave, please look forward to doing that as well. Thank you all. Let's do a round of applause for our entire